Interesting point as we kind of look at what goes on in learning in school, what we learn from parents or teachers and so forth. And I think there's always a pushback about making mistakes, and like mistakes are bad, and mistakes are not good. And the reality is, it's really, really difficult if you're not prepared to be wrong with something, or you're not prepared to make a mistake or do something wrong. You're never going to come up with anything really creative in your life.
Hey everybody, how are you? Welcome back to the episode. This is one that I'm actually very excited about. This is all about creativity and being a creator, and how that used to be looked upon quite differently than it is now. With me, as always, is Jon Brandt, the other host of Underdog
Craig.
Wisdom. And Jon has a really good kind of story from back when you were much younger, prior to being a very successful entrepreneur, but something that probably is a sign of becoming a potential entrepreneur as time goes on. And that has to do a lot with creativity and so forth. So
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think going back to talking a little bit about childhood and what we learned and what we didn't learn, and what we should have learned and what we're actually taught, all doesn't equal. And I think it's very similar today as it was when I was a child. I'm a little older than you, Craig, but I think it hasn't changed a lot. And I think one of the things that interesting quote I remember from, I think it was Picasso, that said that children are all born creators. And then society messes us up, tells us not to be, and changes us. And I think that's really an interesting point as we kind of look at what goes on in learning in school, what we learn from parents or teachers and so forth. And I think there's always a pushback about making mistakes, and like mistakes are bad, and mistakes are not good. And the reality is, it's really, really difficult if you're not prepared to be wrong with something, or you're not prepared to make a mistake or do something wrong. Then you're really not. You're never going to come up with anything really creative in your life. So if you're
sure.
You're always, remember the old bowling lane with the guardrails, if you have those guardrails up all the time, so you'll never have a gutter ball, you're never really going to understand how to be a great bowler, because you have the guardrails up. You just bounce off the guardrails and get it in. So I think there is a stress by education and organizations about making mistakes. And there was an interesting story. I'm kind of think back at this interesting story. I think it was about a little girl that's in a classroom, and she's sitting in the back of the classroom, and the teacher kind of put her back there because she doesn't listen. She's easily distracted. Not a bad kid, but easily distracted and doing other things. And in the middle of class, the teacher's talking, and she sees the little girl drawing. And she stopped her and, looked at her and said, what are you doing? And the little girl said, well, I'm drawing. And the teacher said, what are you drawing? Why don't you tell us what you're drawing? And the little girl said, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the teacher looked at the little girl and said, how are you drawing a picture of God? Nobody knows what God looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And the little girl's reply was, you'll all see in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, we squash that creativity down so much that it becomes something that people don't look at. And I think for me, growing up as a child, I was kind of labeled this kind of slow learner. I deep down, I knew I really wasn't a slow learner, but I certainly was embarrassed when they would take me out of class and give me a remedial reading class or remedial math class.
Mm-hmm.
It was embarrassing for me when they would come into the room and say, John Brandt, you go in this little room here and you leave the rest of your class because it's math time and you're below their standards here.
Mm.
And so I kind of got labeled almost as lazy. I wasn't interested. What I really was interested in was what things that interest me. And back in those days, it was I was obsessed with NFL football, and I thought about the players, and I knew their statistics, and I knew their numbers, and I knew if I was so bad at math, how did I know the 7 times table so well? 7, 14, 21, 28, 30. Those were touchdowns, right?
Mm.
The teams would score 7 points.
Yeah.
So I knew that better than I knew any other times tables. It was like amazing. How does this kid know the 7 times tables, but he doesn't know the 6 times tables?
Sure.
So it was very interesting as a kid going through that and feeling somewhat embarrassed because, I wasn't a great reader, but certainly when I got home and I read my comic books, I would whiz through them because it excited me. I wanted to read about Superman. I wanted to read about Spider-Man. And maybe I, in a weird way, fought back against the norm that was going on. I wasn't a bad kid. I was like that little girl in the back. I was doing my own thing, but that wasn't acceptable, and that was a problem. And I go back also. I remember the teacher split the class up into to do a spelling bee, and there were 2 teams, and they had the 2 captains. The teacher picked 2 captains, probably the 2 smartest kids in the class, or assumed the smartest, the 2 captains to choose. And I'll never forget, this is probably 3rd grade. There was a girl I loved. I just loved her. Too shy to talk to her, too shy to have a conversation with her or anything, but I knew she was the girl of my dreams. And I never forget, they went through the captains chose their team, and of course they got all the way to the bottom, and I was the last kid left. And I'll never forget this girl, and I won't hold it against her, but I'll never forget, she looked at the teacher and she said, "That's not fair, we get him." And that was
the love of your life in 3rd grade.
Broke my heart, embarrassed me. But so much, and maybe I have to thank her again. I always thank people that have said things to me that have changed my life. That was something I still remember it now. It's still something that sits in my mind. But, getting back to the creative part, that to me was interesting. And I wasn't lazy. I just had other things going on in my mind. One was just, I was very entrepreneurial. I would sell, I remember coming home and making holiday cards with my horrible handwriting, making holiday cards and going door to door to people to sell it. I don't know, maybe they felt sorry for me, but people would buy it. So I was entrepreneurial. I was, I had so many other interests than school, and that I was kind of labeled the kid that just didn't get there. Luckily, I got through my grades. I'll never forget, in 1st grade, my best friend, they had him stay back, and him and I were kind of in the same remedial classes. Maybe I was a hair, a little bit more on the ball, and they kept me in class. But I struggled all the way through school, even going into college. But later in life, I am. My wife could tell you I'm amazing at math, self-learned. I'm amazing at certain things. I still can't spell. So don't pick me, Craig. If we do a spelling bee, don't pick me. I'm not the guy. But
don't try to connect with the 3rd grade love of your life to be the other captain.
Yeah. Maybe one of these days I'll send her a note and thank her. Anyway, So ultimately that was part of, for me, I feel that there's a creativity that's being squashed, and we are not giving people the proper, um, you know, pat on the back for being creative and so
Mm.
forth. And, that Picasso statement's really interesting because it's really about, you know, we squelch that. People are creative. We're born creative. Probably everyone's born an entrepreneur in a lot of ways.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah, I mean, it's two interesting things that you just said. One regarding the fact that now math for you is significantly
yeah,
easier for you to do.
yeah,
You can do things in your head and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And I brought my daughter who's a freshman in high school. One of her teachers wanted her for her parent teacher conferences. One of her teachers requested that she was there. And I told her, I said, listen, I'm not going to bring you home to come back here again. So we're going to have to wait in between classes when I go meet with your other teachers. But
yeah,
I believe it was the second or third meeting that we had was with her math teacher. And she is, not terrible at math. She's not great at it. She's an honor roll student, which is great. So, if Cadence ever listens to this, I applaud you for that. But she struggles a bit with math and so forth. And we were talking about different things, and I admitted to him that I was not the best with math, back in the day as well. And the math teacher said, he goes, it's funny when I talk to friends of mine now, just in casual conversation, and let them know, oh, I'm a high school math teacher. And they said, oh, that's got to be, terrible. I was terrible at math. It's, he
yeah,
goes, to be honest with you, if you were to go through my class now and go through all the stuff that you didn't understand then, you would breeze through it.
right.
And he said the reason for that is because you become an adult and you have to start putting other problem solving components together and doing different things. So
Yeah,
you eventually start to train your brain into problem solving, that you can easily figure out, okay, when I'm doing this math that I used to not understand, now it's like, oh, wait a second, this makes so much sense to me because now you've established this kind of problem solving thing because you become an adult,
right. And you become an entrepreneur, right? And you become an entrepreneur, and you realize I got to know my goddamn numbers. I got to know this stuff. And when you put that down on yourself, you put that pressure to yourself that I got to know my numbers. I got to know how to do simple math. I know
Mm.
how to. I need to understand as a CEO, understanding a spreadsheet and understanding where our, when I sit with my accountant quarterly and sit with our chief financial officer, it was about understanding those numbers. Interesting enough, you understand what you need to understand. You don't understand everything. I'm not an expert at calculus and so forth, but if I had
Sure.
to learn it, I think I would have.
Probably
But
easier now than back in high school.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, sure.
But talking about children, I saw the same thing in my daughter, who's an entrepreneur now, who's 25, and she is started her first company and is knocking it out at the park, which really excites me, and I'm glad I'm able to be some support to her. I think she's a hell of a lot smarter than I am, so I expect a lot more from her.
Sure.
But ultimately. She was very similar at school. And I would laugh when I would go to the teacher conference. I'm like, and I would tell my wife, I'm going, it's the same thing they said about me.
Mm.
And so things haven't changed much. At least I haven't seen it. My daughter's out of school now. You see it more with your younger daughters. But things haven't changed much. It's a very expectant thing, not to make mistakes, not to be wrong. And I think there needs to be not that they should applaud people being wrong, but I think if you're not wrong and you're not making mistakes, you're never going to come up with anything original. If you're just so that to me is an important part of being an entrepreneur and a important part of anyone undertaking any kind of challenge or any job. That it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to key is, make the mistakes and learn from them, right? We talked about my favorite George Washington quote, right? We should not look back on past experiences unless it's to derive useful lessons. That, to me, is such an important part of it. So
Mm.
uh, I totally agree with your daughter's teacher. I think that's a
Yeah,
smart way to.
when I thought of it, when you mentioned that, it does make a lot of sense. And, also kind of what you just said now too is, you focus on the things that make the most sense for you to really understand and to move forward, like understanding calculus and all that kind of stuff. For what you're doing, you don't need to know.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you can excel or do much better than you expect when you realize, okay, this is what I need to know. And also I kind of want to know it, which is kind of goes back to what you were saying too earlier about, you didn't like to read and all that kind of stuff in school, but when you would go home, you'd cruise through your comic books because it interested you, and all that kind of stuff.
Instead of doing homework.
Yeah. But going back also to the other point that I wanted to bring up that you said before was the Picasso quote. Children are born creators, but as we grow up, society takes that away. The original name of this podcast when we first started, until we kind of switched it here recently, was The Hidden Path. And it was more along the lines of, which we still talk about quite a bit on these episodes.
It's all part of it. Yeah.
Is the path that society wants you to follow. And then there's the hidden, more ambiguous path that entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs and, even people that are trying to do small startups or small side hustles and things like that, they take this other path and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So is that something also that you think that has happened? And I do kind of see that changing a bit as time goes on, especially now that my daughters are in school, and I see there is a little bit more information and things that, if you are creative or you're quote unquote a creator or potential creator, they're trying to offer some more programs and things like that in schools and electives and so forth. But, the Picasso quote resonates with me a lot because I think that is something my wife is a first grade teacher. So I don't want to say anything necessarily bad about education and so forth. And I think it's quite a bit different, in the earlier years as you start to progress. But
this way, you can actually test whether she's listening to the podcast if you say something negative.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I'll know when my pillow's on the couch and not in my bedroom.
Exactly.
But education, as important as it is in a lot of ways, in many, many different ways, it is, I think, geared now, maybe changing a little bit as time goes on, but especially when I was in school, when you were in school, even more so than me, it was, hey, this is the path. Follow this path. Is what you need to do. You go to school, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a good job, you get benefits, you get 401k, you retire at 65 years old, and you live the last 15, 20 years of your life in pain and soreness because you've worked for the last 40 something years, many times in a job that a lot of people don't really like.
Right.
And I think that's why, kind of squashing that creativity, kind of squashing that out of the box type of learning is really detrimental to a lot, especially when you're younger or as you're progressing in through, later on in kind of elementary, 5th, 6th grade, going into middle school and things like that. If you've squashed that creativity early on, it is something that you start to just not think about, and creating at that point, being a creator, being creative becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Well, no, it's hard to, once you learn something and you're doing it for so long, to be able to go the opposite way and become creative is difficult. It's not that it can't be done. It's been done, but
and yes. I wonder if that's also because of the fact that as you get a little bit older and you're going into middle school and high school and all that kind of stuff, and when you want to be creative and you want to be that, or that, do you now not, or do those kids and all that kind of stuff, and going back to us, did we stop being as creative as we could because it was looked down upon? It was like, hey, you made these mistakes. It was this, because earlier on, it's like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a scientist, or I want to be an astronaut, or whatever. I want to be a princess. And a little kid, that's like, oh, that's a great idea. You start getting a little bit older. I want to be a princess. No, you can't be a princess. You gotta get a job, and you gotta do this, and you gotta do that. And that,
I think the creative force, I think, when I look back, so maybe my pushback, and not finishing college and so forth. And, obviously, people do see that a lot of entrepreneurs who are successful didn't complete formal education, right? Didn't finish college. You start off with Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. The list goes on and on. Of the people that, didn't complete, they were super intelligent people. Don't get me wrong. They didn't fail out of school. They started a business and moved on. So it's very much, it's very much. I think for me, when I look back at it, it's a life. Really, I guess my pushback and everything is a life that I can look back on right now at 60 and go. And I've told my daughter this. My daughter will always ask me, like, Dad, do you have any regrets about life? I have very little regrets. All the mistakes, all the things that I've done, even, being last chosen in the spelling bee, I look at all those things as those are the things that have enhanced me as a human being. And so maybe being a little bit of I don't think I was a renegade. I wasn't the guy out there, fighting with the teacher. I was a good kid, but I had my little pushback, and my little pushback was, I'm not going to listen to what's going on in this classroom. I'm going to be in my own world. I'm going to do my daydreaming. I'm going to do everything else. I had obviously some ADD, and as you've talked about in these episodes, I certainly had that, but I just wasn't interested. But I don't have any regrets about that because I was able to pave my own path. I was able to go through that as we call it, the hidden path, but with no regrets. So the failures, the all those things are all. And I've said this before, so it's like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but wisdom is gained by the mistakes. It's not by the successes. Like there's so much I want people to understand that look back to things that derive the useful lessons from the past, but not everything that you did. Look back at some of the things that you made mistakes, things that didn't work out. Things that you tried to launch that didn't happen. There's so many ideas that are out there. Not every idea is going to be a home run. So you're going to make mistakes. I've gone to where my business was so successful, and then gone to points where, hey, I'm going to start doing this, and I start getting unfocused. I start doing something else, and then this part of the business starts slipping, and then I got to come back. But you learn from those things. So it's not like you shouldn't be doing that. Don't accept failure. I don't say don't have a failure. What I'm saying is don't accept it, because once you accept it, it's kind of like, oh, I'll just keep failing at the same thing. When I say don't accept failure, I actually mean don't repeat the same thing twice. But it's okay to make mistakes. Make as many mistakes as you can. I made it. Like I said, I've made a ton more. We talked about the Babe Ruth concept, right? We've made a ton of more mistakes than we've done successes in our lives. But it's those few successes that we are looked upon as brilliant and great at, and all these great things. But the failures you can look at, but I'm not afraid to talk about my failures, because those were things I can look back at and smile and go, oh, that was wild. That was crazy. Right. I tried that. I did this. I did, I got up in front of people and spoke about this, and it was a complete disaster.
Yeah. And those are all experiences. I mean, that you have to, failure is really an experience. You're experiencing something that either worked or it didn't. It was a mistake or is an error. I mean, and that's really, with anything, I mean, it can be in business. It could be, a restaurant that you decide to go to at one point and you're like, okay, this was a mistake, but at least you learn this. It's like, I'm not going back to this shithole again,
right.
And then, so but those are
my only regrets of bad meals that I've had. But ultimately,
experience is the seed of, I think experience is the seed of wisdom,
Yeah. And the failures and the mistakes are really what wisdom is about. So when you look at a wise man, it's not because he did everything right in his life. It's probably because he did more wrong things and made more mistakes than you have. And you know what? He knows a hell of a lot more than I know, because he's made all these mistakes. That's what I look at somebody with wisdom. I had an older friend who was in politics, who passed away a few years back. You probably remember him. He was his name was Ray Bermucci, and Ray was assistant secretary of labor through President Clinton. He was the commissioner of labor in New Jersey. But one thing he had going for him, he was an older gentleman. He never finished high school. Um, and this guy reached this pinnacle in his life. I mean, he was just one of the wisest people I've ever met. And one of the things he always would say to me was I did a lot of screwed up things in my life. And he
Yeah.
would look at me and he goes, but I don't regret it. I don't regret any of them, you know? Um, and when I look at, people like him that have pursued, um, you know, this amazing life, he ended up with an amazing life and he was an amazing person. And what I recall about him is that, he messed up a lot in his life. He never, he would tell me things that he didn't do right or whatever. And yet here he was, this wise man that reached this amazing pinnacle in his life at an older age too. So those are the people I respect. I respect the people that get knocked down, beat up, and get up.
Yeah.
I don't respect the ones that get beat up and just lay there, but I like the
Right.
ones that get up and continue on, and even in a losing cause, they're fighting to the end, and
Right.
that's okay.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that because I mean that's something that we've all experienced, we've all dealt with, and it's a thing. That I think admitting that and sharing these stories and some of the things that have happened to you, even as far as going back to the your third grade,
Right?
the girl that you loved in third grade,
Yeah.
and realizing that issue that you dealt with not being the best at spelling and then getting kind of called out for it in front of everybody by the love of your life at that point.
I'd love to
Dealing,
embarrass her and say her name, but I'm not going to do
yeah,
that. This would give her an embarrassment back, right?
yeah, exactly.
She knows who she is.
Reciprocation.
She
And,
knows who she is, and she's listening one of these days. But yeah, no, for sure. I mean, those are the things that we accept, we go through. I think, I was just talking earlier today with someone who teaches at a major university, and there's just this huge amount of funding now for entrepreneurial studies. But one of the things he actually said to me was like, yeah, there's a lot of funding out there, but I don't know if they're teaching it the right way. I don't know if they're teaching entrepreneurism the right way.
Mm,
And his comment to me was like, I like the way you teach it, the way you talk about it, because you're willing to show the warts, all the scars. You're willing to show that you bootstrapped, you did these things.
mm,
It's nice to know the what to talk about the widgets and how to produce them and read the spreadsheet and all those other things. Those are all great things, but that's not going to make you an entrepreneur. What's going to make you an entrepreneur is being in the fight,
mm.
jumping into the tiger cage, and battling it out in the arena.
Sure.
I look at like an entrepreneur as a modern day. I'm a Stoic, Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman leader, but I look at it as a modern day going into the Colosseum and battling. Those were the entrepreneurs of the past. Those guys that gutted it out, live or die type of things. And the guys who survived and lost and survived ended up getting better and better at their craft.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. And kind of stepping back a second to what you just said regarding, what from the college, the professor or whoever he was basically stating that the information that's being talked about in these classrooms regarding entrepreneurism and being an entrepreneur is probably not the best way to teach it, and the way that you share it and share your experiences. And, a lot of the stuff that you say is in line with what a lot of other entrepreneurs say. And at the same time, it's contrary to what a lot of entrepreneurs say. So you have, developed this, but, another definition for wisdom that I've heard is education is, or I'm sorry, wisdom is education being passed down from one person to the next. Now, how you gain that information and pass that on is going to be based off of experience. It's going to be based off of mistakes. And also what you've said multiple times on other episodes is learning from people that you don't want to follow in the same path, seeing mistakes that they've made, saying, okay, there's a lot of good things that this person did, or these people did, but at the same time, it was, I don't want to end up being,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this.
No,
I was.
and it's so true because, I get very personal here on this podcast, and I love my dad, my father deeply, but he was a flawed guy, who made a lot of mistakes. Unfortunately, some of his mistakes he made repeatedly, which doesn't lead you to wisdom when you do that a lot. But I will tell you, I thank him because I learned a lot from him in that sense of seeing him go through some of the mistakes. And it kind of saved me, some of those steps because I did learn from him, and that was education. But he was a better educator to me because I learned some of his habits that I learned not to follow some of the habits that he had, and that other people have. So, you really, you really have to define who your heroes are.
Yeah. Yeah.
As the people that fall and you learn from. I mean, I think, we could take it different ways. Some kids grow up and see their parents make mistakes and repeat those mistakes. Other kids will grow up and see their parents make mistakes and go, I'm not going down that path. No way.
Right.
It really depends on who you are and what you value, and so forth. So it's a very interesting path, to create a business and be creative, and be fine with the fact that you can fail at it. Be okay with the fact that it's not always going to work. I told you I went through, 3 really bad business disasters before I got my 5 wins. But those 3 almost knocked me out of the ring. Right. The last one was probably the worst, and it probably put me in major depressive mode. And to get back out and to get back into the Coliseum ring again, took a lot of energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so happy I did. That's another part of my non-regret. I'm so happy that I got up off the floor.
Was there something that that made you get up? Because if that was, if that last one was the one that kind of was almost the one that made you, you got knocked down. It's like, okay, should I just stay down this time? Was there something that you can remember distinctly that made you say, you know what, no, I'm getting up and I'm gonna keep swinging?
Yeah, I think I started to develop. I think that last one, I started to develop the sense of, you're starting to kind of do the same mistake over again. I think I said this before.
Mm-hmm.
Once I realized that, you know what, I'm going to make a mistake, but I'm not making the same one. Pretty soon you start running out of mistakes when you start eliminating some of them. So
were the three that failed, were they because you made the same mistake?
Yeah, I would say at least 2 of them were, related in a way. Just the way I went about things were very much related and very, I think by the third one, the last one was that helped me get up because I didn't make those same 2 mistakes prior. So that one helped me. But, it's a good practice to start thinking about when you do make mistakes, start checking them off and start recording them. Start looking at them and go, I'm not going down this road. A good example of a mistake would be that last business that went under. I think I talked about this before, but I think it bears repeating. I went from, having very few customers and building a business around my customer base that were small. And when I lost 1 or 2 of them, the business kind of, the floor fell out. And you were with me during the NHA days where we didn't have 1 customer even represent 1% of our business. So losing a customer was not a very difficult thing for us. It was a rough build. It took a lot of time to build that model where you had so many customers, but it was a volume play that
Mm,
business built out, and that's the way I wanted it. That was my plan originally. I'm not going back to having a few customers. I got to have a lot. I got to
mm,
have so many that if they tell me to screw tomorrow, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to sleep well that night.
mm.
Um, and
And
that
I think
was
that's a
real.
mistake I think it's a mistake that a lot of
Yeah.
newer businesses or startups run into. I know that was an issue that I had with, my small business from several years ago, is that I
Yeah.
really put all my eggs in that basket. And I said, this has been working for years and years and years.
Yeah.
It was an advertising type of thing. And I said, advertising is not going to be going away. But the way that the advertising
Sure.
changed the entire way that the business ran. And within, just a few short months, it went from being extremely profitable to not making
Yeah.
anything, to the point where I had to shut the doors.
Right.
And that was a big mistake, because my wife said it the entire time. She said, Craig, you should, give yourself some of this in case anything happens, you have something else, going on. So I think,
She had the wisdom. She had the
yeah,
wisdom there. Right. We
she
learn. We
did.
learn a lot from our spouses. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
And
Yeah. And for me, it was just yeah, same thing. It was just like I learned from that. I walked away and go, why did I put myself through this? But again, you had to do it or you never learn it. So it's for sure.
And the interesting thing too there was, because talking about NHA, and I was the national business development manager, so I was really on the front lines of bringing a lot of those
Yeah.
schools and colleges and trade schools in, and talking to them, and going to the some of the big trade shows and talking to people
Yeah.
there, meeting them face to face, as you talk to on a regular basis, and so forth.
Right.
And but as time went on, we started to see other competitors and so forth, and competitors that were much smaller one point, but then also started to kind of get some traction and things like that. And that's when as an entrepreneur, you also said, okay, let me put my creativity cap back on, figure out some unique ways of marketing a little bit differently and all that kind of stuff. And there were meetings that happened and things like that. And then one of the ideas was kind of creating these satellite type
Yeah.
websites and all that kind of stuff, which back in the early or 2008ish and all that kind of stuff. Now with social media, you can kind of do a lot of that stuff. You can have a presence on Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, and all that kind of stuff. But back 2007, 2008, area, MySpace was fairly still popular.
Yeah.
Facebook was really just starting.
Yeah.
YouTube had just started a few years before that, and you used some really creative ideas to create these satellite websites that kind of would lead back to everything we had. And that was another way to get in front of the competitors and
Right.
things like that.
Right. We became experts. Right. Exactly. And what we did was, and again, it was just kind of, the internet was the Wild West a little bit back then, right? So you didn't know. But I had a thought around like why don't we create because we certify these phlebotomists, people that draw blood. Why don't we create the site about phlebotomy and talk about it, and anybody that's interested in it, and not mention our organization, but have that micro or mini site point back to our certification and our organization and what we do in training. And I took that with me. It was kind of an interesting thing, but you're right. Without getting into too much detail about it, what you're saying is being creative doesn't always mean you have to come up with a new idea. You just come up with a new way of being able to, because you eventually, if you're that unique, you're probably way ahead of the curve, too far ahead of the curve, that nobody's going to even know what you're doing. You don't want to get that far. So the concept of being, yes, we were kind of new in certification. We were the first for-profit certifying agency in the healthcare industry that ever existed, which was kind of interesting. We proved that we don't have to be a nonprofit to do what we're doing. We went through accreditation. I battled that. I got it. We created boards. We did these great things, but I created a for-profit entity that never existed in that industry. So that was my uniqueness. It wasn't unique in that we were certifying healthcare professionals. There were competitors, but we had to be better. We had to be better than them in a lot of ways, and we had to be more creative than them. And part of that was, the microsites you talked about, the the building a story around your organization. I told my personal story about my grandmother with the black and blue arm and learning about what a phlebotomist is and being an outsider in an industry. Those things created that business model. Very similar in behavioral health, losing my brother to suicide, finding a better way. We even did microsites with that too. We were very strong with getting parents to go to websites about kids that refuse to go to school refusal. Some behavioral health, we did that for behavioral health for kids that were in school. So those businesses were all, again, it wasn't that I was this creative being that was far above everyone else. I just took some of the things that existed and tried to enhance them. So I know there's a lot of people going, I got to create a new thing. I'm stuck. I got to get this new idea out. And you don't always have to get a new idea out. You could find an old idea. In healthcare, one of the oldest industries ever, I was able to transform healthcare in a lot of ways with the type of certification we offered. What we did is existing. So building a business isn't always about, I got to be at another stratosphere. There are guys out there, I applaud them, but that you don't have to think that if I don't come up with a great concept, I'm never going to build a business. It's not true. Enhance the concept, enhance the stuff that already exists. That's probably the best type of entrepreneur that I see out there, are the ones that can go, they do it this way, and we're just doing it a little bit different this way. And that's made all the difference. That little twist on the original idea has been all the difference that has made us to be a $500 million company. And, and we've just overtaken, we just followed the path of a $20 million company. And we're so much bigger because we did this.
Right.
So,
a good example of that too is, Reddit, right? Reddit's one of the most popular websites in the world right now. And, if you take a step back to what you said just a moment ago about the Wild West of the internet, I mean, message boards, bulletin boards, were around before things like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and all that kind of stuff, where people could go communicate, post, whatever they wanted to, if they wanted to post a link to another website or whatever.
Right.
That was the real Wild West. And they died off fast. And free-for-all boards as well. They were called FFA boards, back then, and in the beginning, they worked very, very well because it was something unique to the internet. It was this way that people could post their own things, but they didn't last too long. But now if you really look at, what Reddit is really just a social bulletin board.
Right.
It's an older idea based off of the internet, I guess. And obviously there were bulletin boards like in supermarkets and all that. There probably still are occasionally where you can post a job for sale, or you're selling your cat or something. But the thing is that they took an old idea that used to work, that died off, added a new component to it, kind of made it a little bit more social and things like that. And now it becomes one of the biggest websites.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, perfect example of taking something and enhancing it and building it out. So all of you people that are out there listening, understand that you don't have to be this. It's not all about coming up with a new idea. It's about coming up with something that will, let's say, evolve. So a good example is evolutionary, revolutionary, right? So it's much easier to build a business evolutionary that evolves, that moves. That okay, this is what someone is doing. We're gonna compete with them. We're gonna enhance what this is. We're gonna come up with these new concepts to market the type of business. Let's get out of the box and try to figure out a new way. This business different that gives us this advantage. Revolutionary is like I'm gonna go discover the light bulb, right? That's something that's fewer and far between. I'm not saying you can't do that, but it's fewer and far between, and it's not the norm for successful business. Um, Probably was in the old days when you needed to create a light bulb and nobody else was doing it.
Mm.
But now it's really just different versions of something similar. Don't worry about being you're the first one out there. It's okay to be the second, third, fourth, fifth out there, but have your twist to it
Yeah.
and build it that way. So
And I think, yeah, that's a good point that you make, because revolutionary also, especially now, there's it's difficult to come up with a new revolutionary idea. It's going to happen. Things are going to happen. AI is kind of one of those things right now. That's
yeah,
but revolutionary also takes much longer for the general population to kind of grasp onto and all that kind of stuff. I think when you're talking about something evolving, evolutionary, like you said, it's much easier to take something that's very familiar to the general population that they're used to seeing and tweaking it in a way to make it a little bit more unique. And that's going to work out a lot more in your favor or in the business's favor, whatever it might be, to take something that's a lot more common and change that and evolve that than trying to revolutionize something.
And that was your Reddit concept, right? Which was brilliant, right? It was taking something that was kind of fading. It wasn't super popular, and they're like, wow.
Oh, it was really gone for years.
Yeah,
I mean, bulletin board systems like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you look at building a business, look at those things. They do say things come back, right? So look at twists, because I think there's a lot of amazing companies out there, but they have they've taken something from the olden days and kind of put it in how can we modernize this? How can we take something that used to be so popular that's kind of gone, but is back again? I see that in the pharmaceutical industry. I see it I see it in a lot of industries where they will actually take an older drug and bring it back in and go, okay, now this is used for this. A good one is, Viagra, right? It was used as a problem for cardio issues. And then it became we all know what Viagra is now, but those are ways of being able to re-enhance things, look at things in a different light and level, and build them out. So yeah, it's very it's interesting when you start looking at and start comparing evolution to revolutionary. Big difference. Big difference.
Huge difference. And I think that's a, hopefully for somebody listening, this is a kind of a light bulb moment for them saying, you know what, maybe the reason why I'm struggling so much is because I'm trying to create a revolutionary idea. And really all I need to do is just evolve on something that is already working here. Going back to a few episodes, we talked about the 10,000 punches and kind of spending 10,000 hours and so forth. But also spending all that time, thousands of hours looking at your competitors, thousands of hours looking at your customers, figuring out what those issues are, find a problem, find a solution. You don't need to revolutionize it. You need to just solve somebody's problem at that point. And if you can do that for enough people, you're going to have something successful. And if you can find something else to add to that, to compound on top of that, that's how you're able to really grow something, substantial. Exactly. Many times that is just finding that little tweak to something that's already very familiar that makes it, work a lot better.
My favorite word is tweak. Because it's a small little shift. That small shift could change things so much into your favor in building something. So, most of you that are listening to this that are, want to be entrepreneurs or already entrepreneurs or have a business that's going already, when you realize if I just can tweak this little piece, this little part of the business, this is, it's almost like digging for oil, right? You're like a quarter inch away from where the oil is underground. If you could just move that slightly, boom, you hit it. The black gold comes shooting out of the ground.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And I want to kind of end the episode here. We have a few questions that came in, over the last couple of weeks. And I kind of compiled a few that actually are about being creative and all that kind of stuff. But one last thing that I just want to touch on regarding, kind of wrapping this segment of the episode up. When it comes to tweaks and evolutionary businesses compared to revolutionary businesses, as an investor, as a co-founder of a VC firm and all that kind of stuff, is that what you find, that the companies that become the most successful or the best investments, or have come back, to you as being, this was a great investment, this is a great company, now it's built up? Was it because more of a tweak, an evolutionary type of concept, over a revolutionary type of concept?
Oh no, yeah. All the successes that we've had have been, evolutionary. Yeah, for sure. They've been, I talked about, we talk about pivoting and so forth. I talked about one of the companies who I appreciate the reach out from a gentleman by the name of Guy Friedman, who I was talking about. I have to give him a thumbs up. Guy was one of the great entrepreneurs that that I invested in. He sold the company and he has another company. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he reached out to me after I talked about the story about him being berated by the board, and how him and I, after those board meetings, would sit down and go through it. But I give him, kudos for being able to pivot and sell his company. And later on, he, once that sale took place and so forth, he did really well, and he's created another business, which is doing amazing. So those were definitely evolutionary businesses. They were, I was just talking with one of my partners in the fund today about just, finding great entrepreneurs, and great entrepreneurs know how to do that. Great entrepreneurs know how to do everything from enhancing something to tweaking to pivoting, all these cool words. But ultimately they know how to do that. And, I know the ones, the ones that are going to be successful when, they get it. And the way they get it is, understanding they don't have to be these spectacular, great people. Even the greatest salespeople that I've ever met aren't that super talented. What I always see about the great salespeople is that they do it so often, and they're very consistent at it, and they want to enhance, and they want to tweak their pitch better, and they want to do things, but they're not the most. People think, oh, he's a great salesman. This guy is just like the shining star. No, he's disciplined. I've seen guys that I couldn't even believe would be great salespeople, and they are, because they understand their product, they understand their service. They've been able to tweak their way of pitching. So the same, very similar, right? They're evolutionary because they're better than someone else selling the same thing.
Sure.
If you could beat somebody at something that's common that everybody's doing, you got to be pretty damn good.
Right.
So as much as revolutionary is exciting, evolutionary is even more exciting because that makes you much more. You're really competitive. You're a real competitor and winner. So
right. And to kind of finish that thought off, I think too, I think that's a big mindset thing as well. And the only reason I say that is because, I like to write on the side. I like to do, fiction and come up with stories and things like that as well. Just kind of a hobby of mine. Especially a lot of the stuff that I do with YouTube and a lot of the stuff that I do with coaching as well. You have to be, creative, and I always try to sharpen my sword as much as I can. But the one thing is that, kind of going back to the writing thing is, you can look at the things that are out there already, and you can kind of say, okay, it's formulaic. Not that what's going to happen in the book, but it's kind of like, okay, I understand the process. I understand the story. I understand how it's unfolding. And for me, it was always something along the lines of like, I wanted to come up with the next best book, the next great idea and all that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't move forward at all because I'm constantly thinking, okay, I need to come up with something. I need to revolutionize some kind of a storyline or a plot or whatever. But it's like, man, I could have just actually been sitting there kind of just utilizing these simple plots, these simple plot points, creating a unique twist around it and be able to kind of move it out. And very much would work the same way, in business as well. There's probably people out there right now that could explode their business by just making a couple tweaks, as opposed to trying to think of that revolutionary idea that everybody's, because even if you come up with that, it's still going to take time. Most likely it's going to take time for people to actually grasp that and actually use it, no matter how good the idea might be.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. Interesting. And the tried true method is great. And if you could put your twist to it, it just takes it to another level for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So so you good to move on to some of these questions? And
I'm glad we're getting people writing questions. It's very cool.
And again, for everyone listening, if you want to submit some questions to us, you can find us on Twitter or X, whichever you want to call it, Instagram, TikTok, website underdogwisdom.com. Feel free to send in questions through any of those platforms. And this question comes in from Deb from California, and she asks, I have tons of creative ideas as an entrepreneur, but have trouble figuring out which ones are viable as actual businesses. How can I determine if my creative ideas have real market potential before wasting time and money trying to actually develop them?
Good question. Okay. So again, it kind of goes back to our point, right? We talk about, which ones have, you got to weigh them. You got to put them on a scale and look at all those ideas. I mean, and so my first question to her is, how many ideas do you have? Let's break it down to 3, right? And if you take these 3 ideas and let's look at some of these ideas that are taking a concept or a product or a service and enhancing it and bringing it out. So that would be the first one is what is the customer? Who is your customer? What is your customer looking for? How are you solving this issue? Take each one of these ideas and create a chart, a positive and negative to each of them. Is it evolutionary? Is it revolutionary? If it's revolutionary, you should think twice about getting that out there. Not to say walk away from the idea, but think twice about that. If you want to create a business, there's a lot to this question, but ultimately I could say that it's what is reflecting with her. Is there, there's other pieces to this too, right? Is there a story behind your idea, right? You want to build out a story brand. I was actually talking to an advertising firm yesterday that's created this whole kind of concept really around let's build, every business has to have a story. So look at each of these ideas where there's a story around them, where you can build a moat. What can other competitors do? What can't other competitors do to get to that idea? And then then try and go out there and test, ask questions, bounce it off people. There's a lot to that question, but I could say you could start eliminating some of those ideas, and what you have left will probably be the idea that you want to move forward with. And that's something that that is something that a customer is going to want to have and want to do. Ideas are great, but then you got to ship, right? We talk about that. We talked about shipping. That was that Seth Godin piece, which I love, which is, get the idea, get it out.
Right.
Don't worry about the warts. Get it out, get responses to it, bring it back home and pull the warts off it, fix it up, put lipstick on the frog and get it back out. And don't delay.
I would probably add, just from previous episodes and things that we've talked about before, to answer Deb's question as well. And I would assume that you would probably agree with this too, is, if you have a bunch of ideas, or even if it's only a few ideas, find the one that has the most purpose as well in your life, the thing that you feel like
the story
you would want to build, regardless if you were able to make it work or not. Yeah. If you can do that and find the purpose behind it, you will pretty much do everything to kind of make it work.
Right. That's it. And it's the story, the purpose, purpose built concepts are, obviously they're stronger. You have more of a connection to them and you want to make them work.
Yes. Awesome. So next question. So it looks like, it's actually all women. These questions that came in, which is interesting. But Jennifer from New York. As an entrepreneur, I struggle with trying new creative things because I'm afraid of failure. How do you push past the fear and just go for an idea that excites you, even if it may not work? I guess this is going to kind of rebound off of some of the things that you just said for Deb's question.
Yeah, I mean, if it excites her and there's a model around it, go for it, get it out there. There are a lot of again, it's back to the Seth Godin concept of getting it out there. Don't be afraid to make the mistakes. Don't be afraid that you're gonna put it out there and it's not going to be accepted. Don't be afraid if you do a podcast like we're doing that no one would listen. Thank God we've kind of kicked it off and we got some great response to this podcast. But I wasn't afraid that it wasn't gonna happen. I was, obviously I wanted to be successful, but you got to go for it. I know it's a simple answer to that question, but you got to go for it. And with the excitement you have for this product and service, get it out there, get it into the hands of people, or get that service, knock on doors. One of the things I see that a lot of entrepreneurs don't do or are scared of is selling, and if you're not open to sell in the beginning, it's going to be very hard to move a product. So you got to knock on doors. You got to get responses. I like test marketing. I'm not going to be negative about it, but you can only do so much testing. I know there's a lot of survey companies, and maybe you could take small doses of surveys. That's fine. Don't go overboard with it. Sometimes people, sometimes it's a waste of your time and energy to ask questions for consumer, especially if you have a consumer product. You want to get some feedback for sure. You want to get feedback, but you also want to get it out there and get people to look at it. If you're excited by it but you're afraid, that's that. You remember that was what I talked about last episode, was those two competing thoughts that go on in your head. The one is the one compete. You have to live with this. And one competing thought is this thing is going to freaking be so successful, along with the second competing thought is I could fail miserably at this. And if you're willing to live with those two things, you're an entrepreneur and you should be getting that product out there, because you shouldn't worry about either. Both of those two things are going out at the same time. Get it out. One of those are going to happen. One of those are going to happen. You may bring it back, may have to tweak it, and you're going to get to where everybody loves it. Or you may get it back and go, this is crap. Let's think of a new way of doing this. So even when number 2 hits, you still have a shot of being able to make this work. But you just got to find out what you did wrong.
Yeah. And one thing that I'll add to that too is, I call it the creative or the creator's curse, which is the fact that we create these ideas, these concepts, these great, revolutionary ideas, we think, sometimes, or evolutionary ideas, I guess is the better way to look at it.
Yeah.
And, we get excited for it for a moment. And then the cursed part of it is that we also create all the, what if this happens? What if it's a complete failure? What if I lose all my, on all that kinds of, the thing is that don't allow the creator's curse. If you're a creator, if you're creative, don't allow that to rule and determine if you're going to actually move forward and actually do something. And one last thing that I'll point out here to this question, I struggle with trying new creative things because I'm afraid of failure, is also think about what we just said earlier on in the episode. If you're listening, Jennifer, is are you trying to revolutionize an idea, or are you just trying to evolve an idea? And if you're thinking of an idea, trying to revolutionize it, maybe you just take a step back and say, okay, how can I evolve some of the ideas that I've had in the past that really kind of resonate with me, that give me something to move forward on, or something that really excites me, that even when that creative curse pops into your head, you say, yeah, but screw it, I still want to do it.
Yeah.
So, push past that and look at that and maybe evolve on some of those ideas as opposed to
Yeah.
trying
And again, don't be afraid of failure. Hate failure, like I always say. Hate it. Detest it. Kick mud on it. But don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. It's part of it. It's part of the process.
Right.
And don't be embarrassed about not being successful if you get it out there. Just keep pushing. Like I keep saying, get the product out there, ship it.
Absolutely. Awesome. And the last question, Jessica from Illinois. Whenever I come up with a creative business idea, I tend to find competitors already doing similar things. Should I skip those ideas and try to brainstorm something completely unique? Or is it okay to put my own creative spin on an existing idea in the market? Yeah,
I think she answered.
I feel like we're going to ask this question first.
I think she answered her own question. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not going to, I won't repeat too much on this, but yeah, of course. There is going to be competitors. We all know that. I play this game sometimes with myself. I think of a product or a service, well, more of a product. And then I go, does this exist? Does this product exist? You know how I find out if the product exists? I go to Amazon. And I go, can I get a pair of glasses that I can adjust? The other day I was looking for the reading glasses, and I was going, is there a pair that actually adjusts to could I bring it to a 1 or a 2 or a 3? I was like, that would be cool. Like if somebody could, because in low light I need, for reading glasses I need a 2.0, but when it's light, I can literally use a 1.0 or 1.5. And I was like, is there something? And I just went on Amazon and looked, and it existed. But it's so funny. I do this a lot. I'll lay in bed at night. My wife thinks I'm nuts, but I'll lay in bed at night and take my iPad and I'll just open up and go, I wonder if this product exists. And I just put it in, go to Amazon, and sure enough, it's there. There's some nut as nutty as I am that has created a product that actually exists. So there's very little that doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, that's the good thing about creating a business, is that there's very little that doesn't exist, but you could find things that you can enhance so much. You could take it to a whole nother level, especially if it's just like barely existing. It's almost revolutionary if you can do that. But so don't be afraid. My answer to her, Jen, I think it was
Jessica was this one.
Jessica is that right? Jen was California. Is that you don't worry about anything else existing. Worry about what you could do to build the business around that product.
And I guess there at the same point is also don't be afraid to niche down into a very tiny market, knowing that you can expand, which is something that I tell a lot of my students with a lot of the YouTube stuff is, start off with something that's very niche down, that's very specific, knowing that you can branch out. Because I mean, using that example, are there a pair of glasses that I can adjust to that thing? That's going to be a very, very niche, audience of potential people. But you've proven that there is, something out there for that. And then it comes down to, hey,
they may have only sold one. I didn't even buy it, but they may have only sold like one of them. Yeah, because I actually thought it was a crazy idea after I thought about it. But because I was like, do I have to carry 2 pairs of glasses with me when I go in a restaurant? I want 2.0 and the other. Confused myself. But ultimately, it's don't be afraid of that things exist out there. Part of very little that doesn't exist anymore.
Right. So I guess one of the best ways to also end this episode is, for anybody that's out there right now that's listening to this anytime in the near or far future from now, because we try to make these episodes as evergreen as possible. You
Right.
know, if you have a child, a nephew, a cousin, whatever it might be, that is showing some of those signs of not paying attention in class, and you're noticing that there's certain things that they really enjoy focusing on and really spend a lot of time and energy on that doesn't really make sense to you as much. Just remember that they could really be the next, bunch of entrepreneurs or even intrapreneurs, moving up, in the world, and could be somebody that creates something really, really, you know, I don't want to say revolutionary, but something that really changes
Yeah.
the way things, happen and do. And appreciate the fact that they are creative, because I
Yeah.
think that's a direction that a lot of people
Yeah. To
will be
that
able to go in
point,
time.
I just want to and I'm not going to talk much about this, but there's medications out there for ADD and so forth. Just, think, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do, but think about that when you look at your child, whether they need to go on medication or not. There is part of those medications that take away the creative part and make you kind of, um, helps you focus, but may take away some of the creativity. So,
Hmm.
so those are things to think about when you go through the process of trying to help your child. And we all love our kids and we want the best for them. So, I never would tell a parent what not to do, but it's something to think about because you do give up something. Certainly, if they're unruly and you're having problems and they're not just can't even sit still. There's different points, but if the child is just showing the signs that we talked about, all the signs I had, um, and the signs you have, think about that again when you're deciding whether to go on medication or not. So
Sure.
we'll leave that to the doctors and to the parents, but wanted
Yeah,
to put it out there. But again,
absolutely.
it's been a great episode. I enjoy talking about this subject because I think it's so important, and we need to keep the creative juices flowing, and we need our children to be able to carry it with them, and we can't stop them from being creative. So
Absolutely. So with that, I think that's a great way to end it. So thanks so much for listening to the episode, and we will catch you on the next one. Again, this is Craig and Jon, Underdog Wisdom. Take care.
thank you.